Welcome to another episode of The Unseen Paranormal, where some of the scariest things are unseen. I'm your host, Eric Freeman. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Unseen Paranormal. Today we are chatting with a listener favorite and friend of the show, author and researcher Steve Stockton. We're going to chat about Steve's latest book, National Park Mysteries and Disappearances, Volume 2. In this volume, Steve dives into the high strangeness and unexplained disappearances of Yosemite, Joshua Tree, and Mount Shasta. All of Steve's books are available on Amazon, Kindle, and wherever fine books are sold. You can also check out Steve on his two YouTube channels, 13 Past Midnight and Missing Persons and Mysteries. Hey, Steve, welcome back to the show. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Eric, thanks for having me on. Glad to be back.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you. We've had to reschedule a couple of times, but no big deal.
Yeah, sorry about that. I've had a couple of miscommunications there, and
yeah,
I think I had a problem with my internet, this, that, and the other. Something happened, but we're here now. I'm glad that it worked out this time.
Yeah. I know you're also a busy man doing all the stuff for both of the channels and doing all the live streams that you do on YouTube. And now y'all have, for Missing Person Mysteries, y'all have it as a podcast now as well.
Yeah, it's just coming out in a podcast. I don't think it's premiered yet. There was a soft premiere, but that was an accident. The guy that was setting it up let one get loose, and it had got, like, by the second day with no promotion or anything, it already had like 50 something downloads. So
yeah, I'm one of those. I listen to it.
But it's kind of the same thing that we do on the YouTube channel, but just an audio version. You get a lot of people that apparently my voice helps people relax or puts them to sleep. And they were like, can't you do it on something besides YouTube where I have to have the screen on?
Yeah.
And the only way you can minimize YouTube is if you have YouTube Premium subscription. And
right.
I don't know how much that costs. But this way, people that just want to listen and not look at anything can do that too. So, but yeah, the channel's doing great. Just passed 113,000 subscribers. So
wow, that's awesome! Congratulations!
Really excited. Thank you. It's amazing. Just when I went on board over there about a year and a half ago, something like that, I think it had like 10,000 subscribers. So we've grown it a lot. We've definitely found our audience, or they found us, or however you want to say it.
Yeah. I tell everybody about it that I know that's into the paranormal stuff and even the missing person stuff, and because it's just, y'all have great content and the writing is wonderful, and of course with you narrating it sounds awesome too. So yeah, just doing great.
Well, thank you. But yeah, missing persons will always be the main focus, but the mysteries side of the name, that can cover a lot of ground. We do get into cryptids and Glimmer Man and paranormal stuff, and then our listener stories. That's one of our most popular features. That's where people write in with their own personal encounters, and I narrate them and put them up there. So it's a lot of fun. Got a good community over there.
Yeah. And I always enjoy coming and hanging out whenever you do live streams, on the various live streams that you do. Hanging out in the chat and meeting new people and stuff is always fun.
Yeah, we do campfire stories on Friday, and that's just what it sounds like. We have people come in and tell, usually, some kind of story, something that's happened to them, stuff you would hear around a campfire, or local legends, or sometimes we'll have an author or something on like that. So it's a lot of fun, something different. It's never the same. You never know what to expect.
Yeah, and I've been on there with you a couple times too. Yeah. All right, so you got Volume 2 out in what's going to be, what is it going to end up being, more than 3 volumes? It's pretty popular.
I think so. Yeah, Volume 3, that's due out in mid-December. I'm still working on it now. It's covering the Pacific Northwest, particularly Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. And then I think I'll just keep going, pick a few states at a time, and see how far I can go with it, because there's something in every state, it seems like.
Right.
This mysterious disappearances or other strange stuff. Because I include haunted stuff in there, or famous crimes, cryptid sightings, a little bit of everything. So it's not just missing persons, but that's in there too.
Yeah, some of these areas you could probably do 3 volumes just on that area.
Oh yeah, like I could do that probably on Joshua Tree alone and on Mount Shasta alone. But just trying to hit the highlights there and share personal experiences. Bill's story in there, the other half of missing persons and mysteries. He went missing for 5 days in Joshua Tree.
Oh, wow.
And had some really strange things happen to him in there. Almost died. It was amazing.
Yeah, the weird thing, a lot of the people that are found, they don't generally come out and talk about their experiences. There are a bunch of people who have had crazy stuff happen, but they won't come out and say anything about it. So that's interesting that he put his story in there.
Yeah, we run into that sometimes. We talk to people, witnesses, or people that's happened to and things, and experiencers. And a lot of them are real reticent to talk about it. And some of them just flat don't remember. That's the odd thing.
Yeah.
They have missing time, or it kind of goes both ways. There are people that maybe have been lost for days, and when they're found, it only seems to them like a few hours has passed. And then likewise, there are people that are only gone for a short time, but when they do come out, they feel like they've been gone for days or weeks or something. So there's something weird that goes on out there in the woods when people go missing.
So I was surprised that you included Yosemite National Park in this, because I've never really heard much about any kind of strange goings on in Yosemite, or even disappearances for that fact.
Yeah, there's a lot there. There's a cluster there, if you will, of disappearances, and then a lot of murders. That seems to be a place where either people get murdered or where they dump the bodies. Of course, that's right there in the edge of the Mojave, basically. And I read the movie, I think it's Goodfellas, where Joe Pesci's character said, there's a lot of holes out there in the desert and a lot of problems in those holes. So it has that kind of reputation, too, that it can be a dumping ground for more nefarious stuff.
Yeah. What's some more of the more famous disappearances in Yosemite?
We had Emerson Holt, one of the older disappearances there, went missing in July of 1943. And he was, a well-versed woodsman, the thing, knew his way around the woods. And even Yosemite National Park officials described his disappearance as mystifying. He's with a large group of friends and kind of stepped away from the crowd for a little while, and they never saw him again. And that seems to happen in a lot of these cases. And again, this was somebody, he was no stranger to the terrain. He had frequented the trails and stuff. And he told him that I think he needed to stop and take a rest or something, told him he would catch up with him. And then there was nothing we ever heard. That was, like I said, August of 1943 was the last when they were still searching for him, but nothing ever became of him. The fate remains unknown. He'd be 132 years old if he was alive. And then in the 50s, had a guy named Louis Miller that went missing out there. And there's a really good book just about Yosemite. If you would like more background into what goes on out there and stuff, it's called Guardians of the Yosemite by a former ranger named Ranger John. And excuse me, he talks about a lot of the just strange things that have happened out there and all the different searches he's been on and the strange stuff that he's seen. And that's another one of those where he just sort of disappeared. I think they were fishing. He went downstream and they never saw him again. Now, a lot of times people do go missing around the water and people are like, oh, well, they got in the water and got away from them and drowned or something. But I don't think that's the case with all these, because a lot of times when people do drown, they will at least find the remains, or the body will wash up. Even with predation from animals and things like that, there's usually something left because the animals don't eat the clothes or the shoes. But I guess that's the stranger part, the more mystifying part of a lot of these cases, is that there's nothing left. And then not too long after that disappearance, and then in 1954, that was 1954 too, about 3 months after Walter Gordon disappeared, had a man named Orville Loss that went missing. He was from Berkeley, and he'd gone down into Yosemite just to hang out, chill about, and knew the place well, had been there before, disappeared completely, was never found again. Just one of those where sometimes it's almost like the mountains just swallow people up. And in fact, that's one of the legends, particularly back east. The Algonquin have a story of there's creatures that can disguise themselves as boulders. And when somebody walks by, they open up, swallow them, close back and crush them, and then spit them out. And a lot of these disappearances, not just in Yosemite, but a lot of national parks, when and if the people are found, it's often in a boulder field that's already been searched, sometimes more than a couple of times, but they appear to have fallen from a great height, even though there's no height to have fallen from. If you think about that, if something that looked like a rock and was made like a rock could open up and swallow you and then spit you back out, you might look like you'd fallen from a great distance.
Right.
So strange things there. And that's part of the weird synchronicities and stuff with a lot of these disappearances. Boulder fields, it's common. Water, it's common for people to go missing. Berry patches, there have been just countless numbers of people that have disappeared while either in a berry field, berry patch, or were actively picking berries. People wearing red tend to go missing more than any other color. And you would think that'd be just the opposite. You'd think if you had on bright red, you'd be easily spotted, but that's not been the case. People of Germanic descent tend to go missing more than any other ancestry. And on the intelligence spectrum, it either seems to be people on the functional end of the autism spectrum, all the way up to people that are like genius level, like PhD candidates and things like that. Both ends of that spectrum are the ones that are most likely to go missing. Most of the disappearances are male, usually people that are fit, marathon runners, mountain climbers. There's that people that you wouldn't necessarily expect to go missing, people that are well-versed in wood lore and orienteering and things and know their way around. And I think that stuff like that's what makes some of these so mysterious. I mean, if it was just, a day hiker or somebody not very experienced and got off the trail and disappeared, that would kind of be understandable. For people that are well versed in it and have spent a lot of time in the outdoors, it doesn't seem as likely. Of course, you have the people just out for a day hike that disappear too.
Right. Yeah, what I find interesting is that all these clusters seem to happen around like mountainous type areas. I know like Joshua Tree is kind of got some desert there too, but it's kind of mountainous as well.
Yeah. That's some rough country out there. Beautiful place. I've spent a lot of time out there. I used to go out there on the weekends, some when I was in Vegas. Joshua Tree's about halfway between Los Angeles and Las Vegas, so it's a centralized location there, but it's desolate yet beautiful. But if you lay those cluster maps over a map of where the most granite and limestone caverns are, they match up. So that kind of fits in with if you've ever read any of the more esoteric stuff, like about the Shaver mystery, or I can't remember the guy's name that wrote about the Darrows that lived an underground race of people that captured humans and things. Kind of fits in with that, and I think that's strange that. The more places there are these caverns, particularly limestone caverns, then you have a cluster of missing people there too. So that's one of the theories. And there's some wild conjecture and stuff out there, but maybe something is taking people and taking them underground.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that would account for some of these disappearances where, you find absolutely nothing. Or one ranger was being interviewed and he said, this person said they either went into the mountain or they went straight up because they are not on the mountain. We searched. This was like a peak where somebody was climbing a peak and had passed people going up the peak. And then I think they'd signed the logbook at the peak and then never seen or heard from again. So where'd they go?
Right. One of the things I was talking to another guest a couple weeks ago, his name's Von Brashler, and he's been doing for like 50 years, been doing research into like time slips and time shifts. And we kind of got into talking about the missing person stuff a little bit because the time slips and time shifts is just something I've kind of dove into here lately. And it seems to, like with the people, like you were saying, who, time seems to go really fast because they have got disoriented, but they think they're only missing for a few minutes, but it's been days or hours or, that type of stuff. And so I find that interesting and think, I know there's lots of conjecture out there about, Bigfoot taking people. And like you were saying, the people that live in the ground and that stuff. But I think time slips, from the way that some of the people have described it when they've gone missing, the people that have actually found it, seems like maybe that could be a phenomenon as well. But it could be also multiple phenomena causing these people to go missing.
Yeah, I think it is. I don't think there's any one particular hard and fast answer. I believe it's, all the above. Plus there's human predators and things out there. There are people that hunt people on these trails. And I've thought about that, like in cases where they'll find only the person's boots or shoes, Well, if you were going to hunt a human and you wanted to give them a sporting chance, sort of, take their shoes and then turn them loose. They're going to run, but they're not going to get far barefoot.
Right.
And the FBI said, this was several years ago, that they thought there was at least one serial killer that was active on the Appalachian Trail that was traveling up and down the trail, killing people, getting off in a little town maybe, and then back on the trail. What better way to hide? Now, there are a lot of people that hike the AT, though, and they know one another. They have trail names, and you would think it would have to be somebody that was either does it all the time or is very, very good at concealing themselves, like, say, an Eric Rudolph or somebody like that, and to hide that identity. Or maybe they just appear like a normal hiker and then go into kill mode. It's scary to think about. And one of the other theories that I'm particularly fond of is feral humans that live in the park. I hear a lot about that in Appalachia, particularly in the Blue Ridge and the Smokies, supposedly like cannibal hillbilly types that live out in the forest off grid and have been that way for generations. And stories I've heard, like the Smokies, there's a guy on YouTube called South Force 10, and he's got just some amazing stories that were allegedly told to him by his relatives who were hired by the government to go in and thin the population of these cannibals out, like back in the 30s, before it was even a national park. And according to him, that's part of the reason for the national park system, is to make a place so that they can contain these people and keep them from snatching people, or at least try to control it. There's the UFO theory, the Bigfoot theory. There's portals, which kind of fits in with the time slips and stuff. Some of the cases, the people that came back and lived to tell the story, talked about how they were walking along. They know they were on the trail, and suddenly everything looked different. And then turned around to maybe go back the other way, and that looked different. Maybe there wasn't even a trail there. They didn't recognize any of the rocks, trees that they were seeing. The sun seemed to be in the wrong place. All kinds of different things. So I think there is a time slip factor there, or portal, vortex, something.
Yeah.
And then there's Bigfoot. You hear those stories that Bigfoot likes to snatch people. I don't know what Bigfoot does with them. I've heard that they interbreed, or that take them for food, or they just take them for sport, maybe. But that's one of the many theories. And now Dogman kind of plays into that. He's gained a lot of popularity here in the last decade or so. Hear a lot of Dogman stories and things. But to me, it's kind of a spin on the werewolf story. They've just made him more American, whereas werewolves tend to be European in nature.
Yeah, and there's a famous story from Albert Ostman in Canada about he claimed back in the like 20s, 30s that he got kidnapped by Bigfoot and finally escaped after 6 days.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I found that story pretty interesting. I think he was a lumberjack, and he was getting out in the woods doing his thing, and yeah, claimed that they held him captive, and he finally saw his chance to get away after 6 days and escaped.
Out here, there's a spot up on Mount St. Helens, which is literally just up the road from me. I can see it on a clear day, especially if I climb up on my roof. But it's called Ape Canyon. How it got that name back in the 20s, there's a group of miners that were out there working a small claim, and claimed that they were jumped by as many as half a dozen Bigfoot, that they couldn't leave their cabin because the things would try to grab them. They rained boulders down on it, and even one part where the guy said that one of them reached inside and tried to get hold of an axe. There was, I guess, a gap in the logs of the cabin there. A big hairy arm came through and tried to get hold of an axe. And one of them, he wrote a book about it. I can't remember the gentleman's name or the name of the book, but they called them ape men. This was before Bigfoot or Sasquatch or anything was really in the known vernacular. But interesting story. He claims to have killed one of them. And there's some research going on. There's a group in California, Dark Waters Paranormal. Now, that's different than the Dark Waters from New Orleans that has the black gentleman that has a radio show or retina network. But this group, they're been coming up here searching for quite some time, and they think they've located the site of the original cabin. I think they found a roof beam and some handmade nails and things. That area, that particular part of Mount St. Helens, that would have been the only thing up there, would have been miners and things like that. It's not a logging area, not a lot of trees there, but I'm not sure what they were mining for there. Gold, I guess, maybe silver. but they think they've found the location of that original cabin. It burned in, I think, let's say the 50s or the early 60s. And since they think they found the cabin, the guy that supposedly shot one, it was up on a bluff and then fell off the bluff when he shot it. So they're hoping to uncover a Sasquatch skeleton. And then the other side of that, of course, when Mount St. Helens blew in, that was 80 or 81, a lot of people claim that it wiped out the Sasquatch population up there. But there's been sightings since then. But the same group is trying to find other Sasquatch remains in the same area where they've been covered with ash and stuff, buried.
Yeah, I don't remember what documentary I was watching or what show, but I saw something about them looking for that original cabin and thinking that they have found the spot. Yeah.
It's interesting. I've got an expedition planned up there. I'm just waiting for a little bit cooler weather. It is probably 20 degrees cooler up there on the mountain, but getting up there, I'd had about 2 weeks ago, I planned to go up with a small film crew, but it was at the base there at the visitor center. It was like almost 90 degrees. Like, we're going to wait. I don't want to be out, hiking around in that weather. But I've got plans to go up there and film some stuff. And also on Mount Rainier, a lot of disappearances from there, a lot of unusual disappearances there. And there's another little place I want to hit that's it's in the Gifford Pinchot National Forest, which is before you get to Mount St. Helens, kind of, or right in that same area. There's a little town there called Yacolt, Yacolt, and turns out that's a Klickitat Indian word, and it means, there's two different meanings. One is Valley of the Fire Demon, and the other is Land of Evil Spirits. Well, there's all kinds of activity that's gone on here. The first time I went through there, I had gone up into the mountains to see some waterfalls up there with a friend and didn't even know anything about this little town. But the minute we drove through there, I turned to the girl who was driving. I said, there's something off here. There's something weird about this place. And I figured out where we were in the name of a little bitty community up in the mountains there. And I couldn't even get cell service. And I just kept remarking, something's strange here. This is weird. But when we got farther down the road and I could get cell service again, I was able to Google it. All kinds of things have happened there. There's like a phantom train or some sort of spook light that they see. There's a thing that happened I'm trying to remember what year it was, early 1900s, called the Yacolt Burn, when somehow the woods caught on fire, and it turned out to be one of the biggest wildfires in Washington state history. And what better place for it to happen than a place that the natives had called Valley of the Fire Demon.
Right. That says all you need to know about it.
And also there's a story there that when the indigenous people occupied that area, the kids of the village had gone out to pick berries. Here's the thing with the berries again. And they all disappeared. I don't have any solid numbers as to how many there were, but all the children from this village disappeared while picking berries. And a whole generation was lost.
Wow.
And that's one of the things that happen there now. Some of the businesses and even in the homes, children laughing and running about. There's a restaurant right across from the train depot. It used to be called Whistle Stop. I think it's got a different name now. But at that time, the lady that owned it lived upstairs above it, and I was in there talking to her. And it was weird the way it came about. Me and the person I was with, we were the only ones in there. It was like in the middle of the day through the week. And I'd gone to the restroom, and I don't know why I did this, was that I started to go out. Just as I took the doorknob to open the door and go out, I hit the light switch with my other hand. Well, the door didn't open. So I'm standing there in the dark now, and I'm like turning the knob, pulling on the door. I hear children laughing. And it sounded like they ran up the hallway. Well, then the door opens right up. It's like they were holding the door on me. And I went back and sat down, and I said, is that's your kids with a sense of humor? And she looked at me kind of oddly, and I said, yeah, I was trying to get out of the bathroom, and there were some kids holding the door on me. I could hear me laughing. And she said, let me tell you a story. And it's something that happens there. She said, like, sometimes in the middle of the night, she would hear them running up and down the back stairs, laughing and giggling. And it happens frequently in that area, but particularly in that one restaurant. And there's another lady that I found on Facebook when I was doing some research on Yacolt that had grown up there. And she said she can remember when she was a little girl, taking a shortcut home from school. She'd walk through a big open field, and she said there were tiny Indian braves. She said about 2, maybe 3 feet tall, that chased her through a field with bows and arrows. So
Wow.
there's something weird going on there. So I'm going up there with a small crew and going to film some stuff. At least tell the story about the kids that went missing while berry picking. A whole generation disappeared. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
You usually don't hear of a whole mass of people going missing like that. Now, of course, there's possible rational explanations that another tribe took them, or anything could have happened. But still, and the fact that it happened while they were berry picking, that comes up in so many different stories where people have gone missing.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's definitely, there's a lot of weird things with the missing person mystery stuff.
And that kind of ties into the Fae theory. We've been exploring that on the channel. That if you look back into the Celtic lore about the Fae or the fairy people, they're responsible for a lot of this stuff, or were thought to be. It was almost like a religion for the Welsh and the Irish, the little people. And Gemma, my co-host over there, and she's also head writer for the show, she's written a book about the Fae theory and how it plays into the missing. But if you look at it within that framework, every other thing that we've talked about is a part of the Fae. They have not all the Fae are little Tinkerbell type creatures. There's literally hundreds of different species. There's pixies, there's fairies, there's gnomes, there's goblins. One type of the Fae are hairy giants, described as, well, there's your Bigfoot. And some of the Celtic stories from the 1800s, they talked about encountering strange little men in horseless carriages that came out of the sky. There's UFOs. It all kind of fits neatly if you look at it that way, as all these cryptids and strange things being a part of the fairy realm. Then that's the answer to everything.
Right.
So it's a deep, deep rabbit hole, but fascinating nonetheless.
Yeah, I've seen on the History Channel to where they still believe in the Fae over in, I think it was Ireland, where they've actually, like modern roads, they have rerouted them because they didn't want to disturb the fairies.
And it's that way in the Nordic countries too. A lot of those places, they'll build a highway around an outcropping of rock rather than tear through it or blow it up or whatever, because they think it'll bring the curse of there. I think it's trolls that they worry about, but some sort of small creatures that live in there. But that's one of those things you kind of have some degree of that folklore in all cultures. The Cherokee. They've got stories about Bigfoot. They've also got stories about little people in the Smokies that they used to war with and then eventually made friends with. The Cherokee just considered a different race of people, but they were rumored to be about 2 or 3 feet tall. And then, of course, in the Smokies, you've got a lot of disappearances. You have fairy lights, ghost lights, and spook lights and things that are seen up there, fairy lanterns. It's kind of frightening to think about.
Yeah, yeah. And I just saw something in the news here recently. Down in South America, they found these tiny skeletons that they've been studying that don't look like some kind of deformed child or anything. They actually think that they're full-grown adults, but they're only like 1.5 feet tall.
Yeah, I've seen some of that, and I thought the same thing first, that it was infants or something. But then when you look at the bone structure and stuff, and then apparently they tested the age of the bones, and they're like, no, this person, whatever it was in his 30s when it died. So, and yeah, that's big in Mexico too. They believe in gnomes, and I've seen some interesting footage on YouTube. Of course, you can see anything on YouTube. There's people able to fake stuff, but I saw something that looked like what I would describe as a garden gnome crossing a road and scaring a bunch of kids. So
yeah, there's so much strangeness all over this world.
There's so much stuff out there that we don't know about. That's what keeps me going. When I first got into the paranormal and started researching all this, I was looking for answers, but found over the years, and I've been doing this for over 50 years now, found out that you never find any answers, or I don't. You find more questions.
Right.
So now it's a quest for questions. And what's the next question? And as Charles Fort said, one measures a circle beginning anywhere. So you can delve into it from any angle and take any path you want. There's just so much out there that I said And the way I think it happened, if you believe in creation theory and that, what we consider the natural came forth out of the supernatural and not the other way around. So the supernatural is what's normal, and then what we live and consider natural is something else. So I think in a way that explains. There's things that we're not meant to know or that not meant to understand, at least not yet. I think maybe someday
Right.
man will evolve to the point. And I think we had it. I think at one time we knew these things. We knew the folklore. We knew the things in the woods. We had powers of to communicate by our minds and things like that. But we've lost that. We've gotten soft with our technology and our instant gratification. And I don't know what it would take for us to get back to use those talents that some people still have and still know how to use. That I think it's things that everybody can do to some degree, as far as psychokinesis or telecommunication, things like that. Where you communicate with your mind, because people have little flashes of intuition and some sort of psychic ability. But I think our third eye, the pineal gland, if you will, I think it's closed up. One of the theories I heard is because we put well, the stuff that the water is treated with, apparently calcium and chlorine and things like that, will close your third eye and make you unable to have any kind of real unusual experiences.
Well, I need to drink more tap water then. No, I'm fine with being empathic and all. I come to terms with that a long time ago, but
yeah, same.
But yeah, so to say the best for the last, Mount Shasta, I've heard so many things about this strange place.
Yeah, that's just. I don't really know of anyone. Maybe there might be a couple people, but I like to say that skeptics are just people that haven't had the right experience yet.
Right.
But I know so many people that have gone to Shasta that have had some kind of experience there, be it almost a religious experience or a supernatural experience, a paranormal experience. There's everything on Mount Shasta. They've seen UFOs, they've seen Bigfoot, they've seen people in golden robes wandering around. There's supposedly ascended masters that live there, Lemurians that live inside the mountain, and they're like Atlanteans. There was a place like Atlantis called Lemuria, and they escaped and somehow made their way to California and live in the mountain. Some of the most unusual Bigfoot encounters I've ever heard about were there, including one where one lady was on Mount Shasta and saw a female Bigfoot giving birth on the slope.
Wow.
And then about almost a year to the day later, another woman was on Mount Shasta and saw a female Bigfoot nursing a baby Bigfoot. So I'm thinking, well, is that the same one? Maybe so. It was born a year ago. Now it's still nursing. Because you don't hear much about that. Occasionally you'll hear about a baby foot or something. Cisco Murdoch's got a story about a baby Bigfoot that she encountered on the side of a road in Alabama, but you don't hear a lot about the babies.
Yeah.
But I mean, if the adults have to come from somewhere, unless they're a construct or just appear fully formed out of whatever dimension they're from. But I'm trying to think, the little town there's a Shasta City, and then there's also a place right there called Weed, California. And it's one of those, there's a vortex or some kind of energy there. It's like Sedona, Arizona. I would compare it to there, or maybe Taos, New Mexico, where you just feel it in the air. There's some sort of different vibrations and things going on there. And as a result, there's all kinds of occultists that have gone and set up shop there over the years. A lot of New Agers and reading rooms of that nature and things. And I talk about this book in the book. There was a man back in the 20s or 30s that had traveled all the way from Chicago to Mount Shasta because of a vision he had that he needed to go there and climb the mountain. Took his wife with him. And one day while out hiking alone, he came across a fair-skinned, blonde-haired man wearing a white robe who later identified himself as Saint Germain, one of the ascended masters. And he gave this person some sort of elixir, the universal component, I think he called it. And when the guy drank it, said then it sort of enlightened him. Everything opened up, and he was able to channel all this information from Saint Germain. And he started a religion based on this. At one time, had several million followers. And I think the only thing that ended the religion, he claimed to be immortal. And then when he passed his way, his followers were kind of disheartened. And let me look and see if I can't think of the name of the religion, but there's still a reading room there. You can still go, and he made audio tapes and stuff too, audio recordings, and you can still hear his sermons, if you will. Secret Society. Guy Ballard, that was the guy's name. He was the occultist from Chicago who ventured to Mount Shasta in 1930 to inquire about reports from another occultist named William Paley regarding a group of holy men called the Brotherhood of Mount Shasta. And Paley claimed that he had observed these holy men several times while traveling on the mountain. Well, Ballard just started having these visions that he needed to go there and check it out, and took his wife with him. And that's Universal Supply was the elixir that the young blonde man offered him during a creamy, milky liquid from a leather flask. But turned out that person was the ascended Master Saint Germain, and then he was suddenly clad in a bejeweled robe where it had just been a white one. And Ballard, his wife Edna, and their son Donald were supposedly chosen by this Saint Germain to be the accredited messengers, and they all channeled the information. What Ballard started was called the Seventh Golden Age, or the I Am movement, and he had the churches set up in the 30s, 31 and 32 when he returned back to Chicago. Created the I Am religious sect, the Saint Germain Press, and the Saint Germain Foundation, which was a nonprofit organization that still exists. But they churned out books, pamphlets, records, all kinds of stuff. Radio, I don't think he was around by the time any of the TV stuff came along, but it was also mostly radio and recorded material. But that's just one of the occultists that have set up shop out there. And if you ever heard the story about the robot grandmother, that happened on Mount Shasta.
Yeah.
There's a little boy that had gone missing, and they found him sometime later in an area that had already been searched, which that happens more often than not, and just sitting on the side of the trail. And then a few days later, he was talking to his grandmother, and he kind of looked at her, and he's like, I don't like the other grandma. And she thought he meant his maternal grandmother. He said, oh, you don't like whatever her name was? And he said, no, I mean the other grandma that looks like you, but that's not you. And she quizzed him a little further about what he was talking about. He said, well, do you remember when I went missing in the woods and nobody could find me? And it had only been a few weeks prior to that. And she's like, yes. And he said, well, I saw you in the woods and I ran to you, but it wasn't you. He said, it looked like you, it sounded like you, but you told me to come with you. You took me to a cave. And he talked about in the cave there was all this like luggage and outdoor equipment and stuff that was dusty and had spider webs on it, backpacks and things that obviously had been there a while, weapons, things like that in this cave. And the robot grandmother had tried to get him to defecate on a piece of paper, which he refused to do. And finally she got frustrated with him and took him back, put him on the trail and said, wait here and somebody will find you. Sure enough, that's where he was found. And like I said, an area that had already been searched. And then the old lady, his actual grandmother, Cappy, he called her, she started thinking about that. And just, I think it was a couple of months prior to his going missing, she had been camping up there with some other people, had some kind of weird encounter at night. And all she remembered seeing was red eyes outside the tent. But the next morning when she came to, she was outside of her tent, several yards away, face down on the ground, and found that she had 2 puncture wounds in the back of her neck.
Wow.
And all that just sort of came back to her. So makes you wonder, did something or somebody that did those punctures, did they take DNA or something to make a clone of her to put in the cave to try to take the kid? And what was the need for him to defecate on a piece of paper? It sounds like they were trying to get DNA or some kind of matter to maybe clone more little kids. I don't know. It's just,
right.
But that's just one of the strange stories from Mount Shasta.
Maybe that's where black-eyed kids come from.
Could be. Well, I've been hearing lately about black-eyed adults.
Yeah.
And I thought about that. The first black-eyed kid reports were in the 90s. That's been, 1990, been 31 years ago. So if they were kids then, they would be adults now. So I'm thinking, are the black-eyed kids from those original sightings, have they grown up and are they adults now, or are the adults fully formed? And then Jim has been doing some research on white-eyed kids.
Huh. I've never heard that.
I hadn't heard of that one either, but she found some information in some occult literature about demons and the different color of eyes that they have. And black-eyed demons are way up the list, but the white-eyed demons are the ones that control all the ones below them with the different color eyes. So getting off into some real woo-woo esoteric stuff here, but, who knows? I don't discount anything in my 57 years on the planet. It'll be 58 on Halloween. I've seen a lot of things I couldn't explain, so who knows what's out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, a lot more different phenomena, like you mentioned earlier, like the dogmen, werewolf type figures have come way more to light in the past 20, 30 years. And then like now there's this lumberjack phenomena that's coming around and all this different stuff. And I don't know if it's because of media reaches so far now.
Yeah, I've wondered about that too. Is it just, our world's gotten smaller and we have access to other people's ideas and writings and thoughts and things? But you must be talking about Flannel Man.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a story. It's in my first book, Strange Things in the Woods. That is a Flannel Man story, but I didn't know it at the time. I'd never heard of Flannel Man when I wrote that. It's been several years ago now, but when I first heard the story, it was about 15 years ago when I still lived in East Tennessee. I changed the location and the person's name and stuff just because he asked me to. But he had gone hiking in a state park and had gotten lost. And he had gone out there he was mad at his boss. Something happened at work, and he sort of just in anger went out, parked his truck, and took off into the woods. Wasn't prepared, really. I think he had a little bit of water with him and a GPS, and the batteries died shortly thereafter. He was lost for a couple of days out there. And thought he was going to die. I mean, you can go several days without food, but if you don't have water, a couple of days, you're pretty much done for.
Right.
But he was wandering around and he heard something, went to the noise. This was on the second, going on the third day, and there was a guy, like the typical lumberjack, flailing away at a tree with a double-bladed axe. And he ran up to the guy, and I don't think the guy talked to him so much as just kind of gestured, but pointed up a hillside. This guy, just the last bit of his energy, he crawled up this bank, and sure enough, there was a dirt service road up there, and he just kind of collapsed. Park Service employee came along shortly thereafter, found him, and he was told the park ranger, or whatever it was, Park Service employee, that, so if the guy down there, the lumberjack, hadn't told me that this road was up here, he said, I never would have found it. I didn't think about going up. I was going along parallel with it and didn't know it. And so the employee that picked him up was like, lumberjack? And he said, yeah, just down over the bank. There's a guy down there cutting trees. And guy's like, wait here in the truck. I'm going to go check this out. Went down over the bank. Sure enough, a few minutes later, he comes back, gets in the truck. They take the guy to the headquarters of the state park there. And he's still in pretty rough shape, so they decide they're going to call an ambulance to pick him up and at least take him to the hospital and get him hydrated and everything. And before the ambulance comes to take him away, he asked the ranger again, so, well, what about the guy with the axe? He said, he literally saved my life. I don't want to get him in any trouble or anything, so, go easy on him. He said the ranger put his hand on his shoulder, looked him in the eye and said, son, that there was nobody down over that bank. There was no sign of anybody with an axe, no lumberjack, no sign that anybody had ever been cutting trees in here. He said, in fact, we sort of frown on that sort of thing. So that was a friendly Flannel Man story from, probably 2001, 2002, somewhere around in there, before I'd ever heard of the creature or the entity. I'd never heard of it until I heard of it on Strange Familiars with Timothy Renner. But then I've heard of lots of other sightings of it. A lot of other people come forth, and like me, had Flannel Man stories. They just didn't know it was Flannel Man, that this was an entity that a lot of people encountered.
Yeah, I found that interesting, and I've been hearing for years, the veil is thinning, if that's what you want to call it. But I wonder if that's why that we're getting all these other creatures and cryptids and all this other stuff.
I've heard that too. Like the way it normally thins in the autumn and the fall of the year, what they call Samhain. But now I've heard other people saying, and particularly people that are into the occult and practitioners and stuff, say that it's thinning all the time and getting thinner still, and that's where a lot of this stuff is coming from, and why all these new sightings and new strange things are happening, that there's some sort of shift in the paradigm or in the cosmic makeup of things. And again, getting off into some real woo territory there. But like I said, it's either that or our world has gotten so smaller with instant communications and more people talking about it and coming forward with their stories and things. But maybe a little bit of both. But definitely something going on. It's getting weird out there, and all some of these recent cases, like the family in Mariposa County in the mountains out there, where they found all of them dead on the trail. Mom, dad, the baby, and the dog, all dead in the middle of the trail. The dad died sitting up and was still that way when they found him. People don't die sitting up, I don't think. That's something about that when the mom was about 30 yards further up the trail. The only cell phone that they had with them was in the man's pocket. They've tried to blame an algae bloom, but that's pretty much been discounted. Mine gases, the nearest mine was 3 miles away. Lightning strike, that would have shown in the autopsy results, because if you're not directly struck by lightning, if it travels and surges through you, it stops your heart, but there's still usually some other indicators of it. Burst capillaries in the eyeballs is one thing, or reddening of the skin, or burn marks where it exited, things like that. So far there hasn't been any reasonable explanation that I've heard. And I don't think the toxicology reports are back unless they came back in the last day or two. And no idea. I mean, they're just dead, and that shouldn't happen. Then I don't know if you've been keeping up with the Gabby Petito case. That's a strange one, but I think it's more of a human predator there. But just all this weird stuff going on, and that one is just, for whatever reason, that story has captivated the entire world. I think not just the U.S., but all over the internet. We did a story about that the other day, and then people went nuts. And then I did a live update when they announced that she'd been found, and that was probably the most viewed live stream I've ever done. So I don't know what it is about her or that case that people find so fascinating, but that's one of the most viewed things on YouTube and on the internet in general, most searched for currently.
One of the strangest things, talk about weird stuff going on. One of the strangest things I've had happen in a long time. I mean, I go out and investigate haunted places, stuff like that. So I have stuff happen. But one of the weirdest things is when I was in the chat room on one of your live streams a while back, and we were talking about the Titanic. You were on there with Cisco Murdoch.
Yeah.
That was weird. And for the listeners, so I was in the chat room and listening to Steve and Cisco tell stories, and the topic that they picked that night was the Titanic and like the haunted stuff and the curse surrounding that. And at the same time they were talking about that, and we're all chatting about in the chat room and asking questions and stuff, the ice wall at the Titanic Museum in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, collapsed and sent a few people to the hospital.
Yeah, like right at literally the moment we were talking about the curse and the different locations where you could go and see Titanic artifacts. The Luxor in Las Vegas was one, and then I specifically mentioned the one in Pigeon Forge. And based on the times that those reports came in, it would have been when I was speaking about it that. And the next day, like, Cisco's like, "Did you see this?" She's like, "Did we cause this?" And I'm like, "I hope not." But we've decided to do a Titanic paranormal challenge. I've ordered a piece of a little tiny lump of coal that was actually brought up from the wreckage. And then I've got some reproduction artifacts, a first-class ticket and a menu and some things like that. I'm going to put all that together into one little package and kind of send it around to different people that have empathic abilities and stuff, and see if the curse follows or if they get anything off of it. One lady that owned a chunk of coal kept seeing an apparition in her house of a coal tender, a guy in dirty overalls and smudged face and stuff. I think he would point his finger at her or shake his finger at her or something. She got rid of the coal, the apparition disappeared. I mean, that could be subconscious, guilty conscience, something like that. But we're going to put that theory to the test here soon. But
yeah, I definitely want to be a part of that. Like I told you,
absolutely. You're in on it with us. But yeah, what were the odds of the second that we're talking about that place, that this ice wall collapses? Apparently, they had something set up where it was real ice, and you could walk up and feel it, to sort of feel like what an iceberg was like. And I don't know if the cooling system or refrigerant or whatever kept it frozen failed or what, but collapsed. It seemed like it sent 3 or maybe 5 people to the hospital. I don't think it was any grave injuries or anything like that. But you can imagine, several pounds of ice falling on you. That's not going to feel good anyway.
Yeah, there was one they airlifted to a trauma center in Knoxville, I believe, because of head injury. But I think they recovered. I think they're fine. I was just at that museum in April, and I actually touched that ice wall. And what it is they have a recreation of the bridge of the ship. And when you walk out the door from where like the big ship's wheel and stuff is, it's kind of like the ice in your freezer, like the old freezers get the ice on the sides.
Yeah.
Is kind of how it's set up, but it's made so you can feel what the iceberg would feel like. And then they have like a trough of 28-degree salt water you can stick your hand in to see what the people that went overboard felt. And yeah, that ice wall is massive. It's probably 10 foot tall and probably 15, 20 foot wide.
Wow.
So there's a lot of ice. Yeah.
So the Titanic curse strikes again.
Yeah.
I went on Cisco's show the other night, and we're talking about ghost children, haunted playgrounds, and things like that. And we were joking around saying, well, hopefully, it won't cause anything to collapse on anybody tonight. But that was just so weird that it happened like that. I mean, synchronistic for sure.
Right. Yeah. And something like that, it just can't be a coincidence. That's just too strange to be a coincidence.
Yeah. I think this is like the curse's way of letting us know that it's still active and valid.
Yeah. Like we know what you're talking about. But everybody should go check out Cisco's channel too. She has an awesome YouTube channel, and I love watching y'all's chats on there.
Yeah, I've been joining her over there on Mondays for Monday Madness, and just all kinds of topics. We've covered anything and everything, but that's a Journey Through the Gate Paranormal Portal Podcast. Cisco likes those long names.
Yeah, I was actually just looking for it on YouTube. I'm glad you know what it is.
And then the book we wrote together, it's really her stories, but I came along behind her and told anecdotes and stuff about what she said. It's We Are All Children in the Wilderness of the Afterlife, a guided tour through a haunted life. It took me about 2 years to remember all that without stumbling over it. So yeah, Journey Through the Gate, the Paranormal Portal Podcast. A lot of fun over there. And then she has some real interesting guests and stuff throughout the week. Just whenever she does her shows.
Yeah, she has some amazing stories, and have had some, just like you, have had some crazy paranormal experiences and she always says she wouldn't believe it unless she experienced it herself.
Yeah, the same way. I mean, some of the stuff that I've seen and experienced firsthand, seen with my own eyes, it would be, I'm one to believe people anyway, try to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
But it would be unbelievable almost to hear that coming from somebody else. But I saw it happen. I was there, and it's that gives you a whole different perspective on things. And I think there are a few, hoaxers and people that tend to exaggerate things a little too much. But I've had stuff happen, where even telling my version of it, I've kind of downplayed a little bit. I left out some frightening details and stuff, just to make it more believable, because it was just so unbelievable.
Yeah. I think most people just have a sense if somebody's BSing them or not. Even with some of the crazy tales in the paranormal I've heard, but a lot of people, they don't have anything to gain. Now, if they're putting it out there, like you were talking about earlier, like on YouTube or on Facebook, and just looking for, clicks or likes or attention, then, I can understand them having an ulterior motive. But most people that have those crazy experiences, like you said, they'll leave out certain details because they don't want you to think they're crazy, or they just are very hush-hush about them.
Yeah, and we get those on the listener stories that they send into Missing Persons and Mysteries channel. We're like, I've never told anybody about this before. I've never told my spouse, or never talked to my family members, but this is what happened. That's something. And that's, I think, what the benefit of that is people hear other people's stories, and it emboldens them a little bit to think, well, maybe I'm not crazy, or a very similar thing happened to me, and now I feel comfortable talking about it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of providing a service there almost. Telling people, hey, it's okay to admit that you've had some stuff happen you don't understand.
Yeah, I've been doing research specifically on Reddit and Facebook, but looking for people's stories to actually narrate, to do a couple of bonus episodes for October. And and some of the people won't even message me back. Like, I know they've seen the message when I ask, can I use a story? Because I think even though they're brave enough to put it on Reddit or on, some Facebook paranormal group, they're afraid, even if they're anonymous, nobody will ever know who they are, to have it out there in the world.
Yeah, I agree. Still that fear of ridicule or being thought to be crazy or something like that.
Right.
And I agree. I mean, that's a lot of the reason I never talked about stuff that happened to me very much. My parents knew about it, but they were experiencers themselves. They had both had a lot of different encounters that they couldn't explain, so they were a little more sympathetic than say some of my friends' parents would have been.
Yeah, I've heard you talk about some of your parents' experiences on some of the live streams, and one of the stories that I thought was really interesting was when your dad had a real human skull in the garage.
Yeah, yeah, that was he. They were antique dealers, but in addition to that, he traded in Civil War and Native American artifacts, and he would buy like sometimes single arrowheads all the way up to full collections. And he'd gone to look at a collection, and the guy had a skull as part of the collection. It was from the teeth up, not didn't have the lower jaw, but the upper part of the skull. And my dad was like, you're not supposed to have that. And then the guy had taken it out of a burial mound.
Wow.
And my dad was basically shaming the guy, like, you shouldn't have that. Arrowheads, that's one thing, but taking somebody's bones. And the guy's like, well, I'll sell it to you, and you can do whatever you want to with it. So my dad did. He bought it, and it resided in our garage for a while until we took it over. He knew the area where the guy had basically robbed the grave. May not have been the same exact place in the mound, but took it and put it back. But that just, my mom didn't like that at all. She was very open to things like that. She was an empath, and it disturbed her. But I would get a weird feeling going out there in the garage, and the skull was in a curio cabinet, a china cabinet that we had out there, old curly-cued looking Victorian cabinet, and it just, I don't know, gave me the chills. But I was glad when we got it out of there and returned it to its rightful place. And I remember my dad, I went with him went to return it, and he's like, I don't want to get caught. He said, no, who's going to believe that I'm putting the skull back?
Right.
But he did put it back, and hopefully that native is at rest, because then some strange things happened, in the garage while that was out there.
Yeah.
Just nothing major, but I'd hear stuff out there. And again, might have been my imagination because I was a kid and open to that sort of thing anyway. But, you've got a human skull out there, and could be a person looking for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whoever it belongs to.
Yeah. Well, I think you're coming on today, Steve. It's a pleasure as always to talk to you.
Oh, my pleasure as well. Thanks for having me on, Eric.
So go check out National Park Mysteries and Disappearances, Volume 1 and 2. Volume 1 is about the Great Smoky Mountains. Volume 2 is about Yosemite, Joshua Tree, and Mount Shasta. And Volume 3, Steve said, is going to be about the Pacific Northwest. So all those weird disappearances and ghostly activity and all that good stuff. And check out Steve on his YouTube channel, 13 Past Midnight and Missing Persons and Mysteries. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Have a good day. Be safe out there. Join us next time for a new episode of The Unseen Paranormal. Until then, head over to the Unseen Paranormal Lounge on Facebook for all the latest updates and discussions about the show. You can also find us on Instagram, Twitter, or at unseenparanormalpodcast.com. And please rate, review, share, and subscribe to help more people discover the show. The Unseen Paranormal Podcast is proud to be the ambassador for paranormal for Verbal.com. A big thank you to my friend Chris Lips for the awesome theme music. You can find more of his music on Apple, Amazon, or Spotify. And as always, thank you for listening.
You have come to the end of the line. Whoa. And I can feel you as you pass the other side.